today's episode, we have episode 3 of our team-by-team fantasy football previews, where we go division by division to find each team's most relevant fantasy storylines. Today's divisions, the AFC East and North. If you've missed parts 1 and 2, you can see both episodes in our feed. And today's episode of the Progression to the Mean podcast is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy is the best and easiest way to play fantasy football. Just draft your team and that's it. No waivers, trades, or weekly start-sit decisions. Underdog will automatically play your best players at each position every week. Sign up today with promo code RTM to receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. You can sign up for as little as $10 to start drafting today. It is bar none the best way to practice for redraft leagues. Okay, so we are now shifting gears here to the AFC North. What a treat I get to talk about my guy Jamarr Chase. Aidan, I appreciate you.
Dude, I just get the shittiest teams to talk
Aidan.
about.
I really do.
Dude, at this Keegan's team this division is going to make me smile so hard.
Looking at this team in particular, not a lot has changed. A lot of continuity. Same play caller, same 2 stud wide receivers. Joe Mixon is still on the team. We have a new backup running back. The offensive line should be like relatively mid, good, not great. I think when you're taking a look at this offense, got to look at Jamarr Chase. And Jamarr Chase last season, if you look at his overall raw counting numbers, 87 receptions, 1,064 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Like, oh, that's a pretty good season. A little disappointing. And then you factor in that he only played 12 games. You're like, holy shit, that's a really good pace in 12 games.
That's really
And then
good.
you realize he played 4 of those 12 games coming off of a fractured hip. He fucking fractured his hip last season, came back, played, and had 4 out of 5 of those games he played in coming back off the fractured hip with top 14 finishes, including 2 top 5 games. And you look at his underlying statistics, he led the NFL in targets per game. He was 4th in target percentage. He finished 5th in fantasy points per game. When he came back, he was good, and hip injuries usually sink guys for the rest of the year. He played 3 playoff games. In those 3 playoff games, he had 28 targets, had 20 receptions, 220 receiving yards, and scored 2 touchdowns. Are we in a world where last year was a what-if season, where like if Jamarr Chase runs hot towards the end of the year, he finishes as wide receiver 1? It wasn't Justin Jefferson who finishes as wide receiver 1. It was Jamarr Chase. I think that was in the range of outcomes for Chase, and I feel like we got robbed of that last season when he got hurt. And I think it is a kind of a hot take because of how good Jefferson's been, but if you wanted to look me in the eyes and say Jamarr Chase is the top wide receiver in fantasy football, he's going to finish as the wide receiver 1, and you should take him number 1 overall, I would not argue against it. I would not tell you were a fool. I wouldn't say you're wrong. I think it's a hot take because of what Justin Jefferson's done in his career. But Jamarr Chase, I think, could have a record-breaking season this year. I think everything's aligning for Chase. So my question to Keegan, because I already know the answer for Aidan, because I think Aidan has a Justin Jefferson tattoo across his back. He has him hitting the gritty in his first NFL game. Keegan, would you take Jamarr Chase over Justin Jefferson in fantasy football this season?
Sure. I think my take is what side of the bed do you wake up on? I have them on the same plane of skill level, production. Like, they're just both elite. I think it's just like, what color do you like more? You like orange, white, and black? Or do you like purple, yellow, and white? You know, what do you want to be today? Do you want to be Justin Jefferson or do you want to be Justin Chase? I think Justin Chase, Jamarr Chase, whatever you want to be that day works. I think they're both studs. Why not? Dude, this is going to sound funny, but I'm at the point where I keep getting gifted 101 in best ball drafts, and I'm like highly considering just taking Jamarr Chase for a little mix-up, just a little variety, just to make sure I've got exposure to both, so I get a little bit of Chase there too. I like them both.
I wish you had more of a hotter take there, but that's probably the best answer. Is they're both very good. Yeah. And you're lucky to have either
good.
One on your fantasy team.
Awesome,
that's not going to be a great TikTok,
awesome.
Keegan, but that makes for a really just fun, pleasing conversation. When I'm looking at a fun, pleasing conversation, I usually don't want to talk about the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson, so I appreciate Aidan Holler here going ahead and giving himself the Cleveland Browns. So, Aidan, tell us a little bit about Kevin Stefanski redacted on the Cleveland Browns in 2023. What does their offense look like for fantasy football?
So I feel like there's only one place to start here, and it's with maybe the most underrated player in fantasy football, which is Nicholas Chubb, dude. What a producer year in and year out. I don't understand why Nick Chubb doesn't get more love in the fantasy community. He is consistent producer his last 4 years, averaging just over 250 carries, 1,300 plus yards, and 10 tutties. It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. If you're in a standard league, you could make the case for him being running back 1 this year, I think. In PPR leagues, the argument is a lot harder to make, given that he's probably only going to catch, ballpark 30 balls. So he's probably closer to that running back 5 or 6 finish, maybe even a bit farther, depending on if he was potentially miss any time. But he is going to get so much volume this year without anyone really challenging him for touches. You've got Jerome Ford, who everyone thinks is, this fantasy darling. But Nick Chubb is going to absolutely eat up touches in this offense and dominate in fantasy leagues. So my 23% exposure in best ball underdog drafts, back up my stance that I'm very high
your
on Nick Chubb.
Wow, he just
I am 23% through 40 drafts with Nick Chubb.
His
so I am
24%. What was your closing ADP on Nick Chubb? What are you getting, like 18th, 19th? That is going up. He is climbing into the first round.
Yeah,
you're such a sharp.
I think I had
dude.
him around 15. I'm sharp on him.
You're sharp.
I'm moving
You're
his
sharp.
ADP. So past Chubb, obviously, I expect big things from this offense this year, but it all comes down to Deshaun Watson, because obviously, yes. I don't have any. Even if Deshaun Watson sucks, I think Nick Chubb is going to get his. But what happens in the passing game obviously is reliant on Deshaun Watson, and I do see him rebounding this year. I think you kind of started to see shades of the old Deshaun Watson down the stretch last year, and Kevin Stefanski has been open in the offseason in terms of tweaking that playbook to make things work for Deshaun. So I see big things for that offense. I personally have him as QB 10, sandwiched in between Dak and Danny Dimes. And personally, I think he has the highest ceiling out of the 3 of them by far because of his rushing ability. We've seen what he's done in Houston. If he could even give us 85% of that magic again, I think we're in for a really, really special season. And lastly, I'm just going to touch on him real quick. Amari Cooper finished as wide receiver 10 last year, and it's like nobody cares. This dude is another just underrated producer in fantasy football who's going to sit on your roster and just average 15, 16 fantasy points a game. Going to be in your lineup every single week and is an awesome fit. So this is a fun offense. Again, in general, I'm drafting a ton of Cleveland Browns in all formats. I think they're going to shock people and make that division pretty tough for both the Bengals and the Ravens.
I'm compelled, honestly. I am so interested in this team and what they're going to do this year. I'm a huge DPJ guy. I think Amari Cooper's a stud.
As the first wide receiver. You got to quit Donovan Peoples-Jones, man. Like, that's insane.
No, my take is he outproduces Elijah Moore this year, and then everybody finally realized that Elijah Moore is just mid. But yeah, I'm all in on Nick too. All right, so now we're on to the Steelers, right?
Oh my goodness. Aidan gave Keegan the Steelers. This is the stuff that dreams are made of. Keegan, tell us a little bit about the Pittsburgh Steelers and future Pro Bowl quarterback Kenny Pickett in 2023.
All right, let me tell you how shitty the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is. The problem starts with Matt Canada, and it continues with Kenny Pickett. He averaged 6.2 yards per pass attempt and had a 1.8% TD rate across 12 starts as a rookie. He had a league worst 39% red zone completion rate and took 6 red zone sacks in 13 games. The assumption is that Matt Canada will probably run the same dink and dunk conservative offense again, which ranks 29th in play action rate, 29th in fourth down aggressiveness, and 25th in neutral pass rate. So if you're going to sit here and tell me that there's something to buy in this passing offense, I'm going to tell you you're an idiot. I want nothing to do with most of this team, but I will be nice and say some positive things about this team.
Tick-tock, tick-tock. Throw it on the feed, baby. We're cutting that. Let me tell you
I don't know how you really feel,
Steelers. Let me tell you how shitty the Steelers offense is going to be. It was one of the hottest things I've ever heard come out of your mouth, that you came in hot.
Oh,
right,
you
what
like
are you
Matt
gonna say?
Canada?
Nice?
Fuck you.
If Okay, let me make a point here. Right? Like everybody loves to talk regression. Everybody loves to talk positive regression. Regression to the mean. We love that. Shout
Regression
regression
they
to the
mean.
mean. This is how bad Pittsburgh is. That every single player on this team is a candidate for positive regression because they were fucking horrible. they were horrible. Like, and if I had to pick two, like I'll say something nice about two people, and I picked two people that I would have to be in on. It's Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth. Deontay Johnson, according to Hayden Winks, had basically last year his expected TD number was 6.7 touchdowns based on his fantasy usage and just overall wide receiver usage. So to go from 0 touchdown to 6.7 might not happen, but basically you're giving him 7 touchdowns of expected range that he can positively regress to based on his uses last year. So I definitely think there's more for him there. Now, Pat is somebody I'm a little bit more intrigued with. He was 8th in yards per route run at the tight end position, 7th in PFF receiving grade at his position, and he did this on the 9th most routes. I'd probably say I'm buying Pat because he's a pretty good tight end that's discounted if you miss out on the elite guys. I'm kind of into that, but you can't tell me to draft Najee Harris. You can't tell me to buy into the corpse of Allen Robinson, and I'm damn sure not buying into deep threat, spectacular catch monster George Pickens, who is very one-dimensional. I can't believe I had to research the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got depressed doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, I kind of echo a lot of what you. So yeah, DJ and Muth are my guys. I'm just glad like you said it, not me. I just feel like after our best ball draft a couple weeks ago, like I saw the Steelers and I was like, this would be perfect for the people if Keegan had to speak about them. So yeah, Matt Canada is a war criminal. It's a bad offense. It's just like nothing makes sense. There's no rhythm. It's not fun to watch. You could bend my arm with Najee at the right spot though. I could be warmed
never
up to
again.
the idea of Najee.
Never again.
I know.
I'd rather
burned
just
by
take
it last
Rashad
year, but
White.
like,
I'd rather just take Rashad White in the 8th, like, or the 7th.
My hot take is Najee Harris just isn't good. Like, I just don't think he's like a very efficient running back.
He's fine.
Like,
he's fine.
He had a plate in his foot last year
fine.
too.
Sure.
He's good, but like he's not explosive. So it's like,
hey, okay, let me read you something
what are we
real
gonna
quick. He was 43rd in yards after contact per carry at only 2.8, and that's sandwiched in between Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette. And next gen stats,
okay,
rushing
that's
yards
tough.
over expected.
Jalen Warren's
Those are
better.
two tough guys to
Like,
beat.
Najee Harris is a volume guy. That's it. He's just a volume guy. And sure, we like
he's
that.
good though. Like,
But go draft James Conner in the 8th round instead.
I had Najee Harris on a fantasy team. He ruined my season, and whenever Jalen Warren got the ball, he looked better. So it was like I had Jalen Warren on my team handcuffed to him, and I was like, can Jalen Warren just get on the field more so I can play the other guy? And our last team here in the AFC North is one of the most talked about teams this offseason, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. So I'm looking at this Ravens team, and they've revamped their passing attack. They brought in Todd Monken. They, like Andy not wanting to play with this tour anymore, they threw Greg Roman in the trash, right? I'm going to miss Patrick Ricard running slant routes at 303 pounds as a fullback. That was truly generational stuff, Greg.
I won't.
And
wheel
I think
routes.
the main
wheel
question,
routes.
Yeah, wheel routes. Dude,
so
it was out of pocket and they were injured. So I think we have a healthy J.K. Dobbins. We'll have a healthy Mark Andrews. We have a properly compensated Lamar Jackson leading this offense. And I'm just curious to know which wide receiver leads this team in targets in 2023. A lot of the buzz coming out of OTAs is really clear. Consistent drumbeat. The Ravens are going to throw the ball more and run at a faster pace. So they have 3 new additions to the wide receiver room with OBJ, Zay Flowers, and Nelson Aguilar, and they will all be joining Rashad Bateman a year after his Lisfranc surgery. So Lamar finally has like a real wide receiver core along with Mark Andrews. And I think we've been talking about this a little bit, like how do we approach this? Which wide receiver do we take? It's probably just safest to take Lamar Jackson instead of taking any of these wide receivers. But his top 3 wide receiver targets are being drafted in the same range. Bateman, 88th, Zay, 90th, OBJ, 112. I don't think any of these guys is going to lead this team in targets. That's going to belong to Mark Andrews. But call me crazy. Whoever finishes as the top wide receiver in this offense, I think they could easily snag a top 24 wide receiver finish. So if you were going to correctly pick the Ravens wide receiver to be their wide receiver 1, you're going to get a top 24 guy, in my opinion, in the 8th or 9th round. And when I'm looking at these 3 guys, like, I'm a big supporter of Rashad Bateman, but the matter of fact is he can't stay healthy. And I feel like this season is more about proving that he can stay on the field instead of dominating his competition. And I'm really hesitant to draft wide receivers with foot issues. Coming off of Liz Frank, it kind of just seems like nightmare fuel. Jay is old, and he's coming off his second ACL. Like, the odds of him breaking out are kind of slim, but he is a fun gamble in the later rounds to take a swing at, considering, OBJ's a fun player to root for, and he's had some ultra-productive seasons in the past. And that kind of leads us to Zay Flowers. So Zay Flowers is a first-round, ultra-talented rookie. Now, it did take him a while to break out, and he is an older prospect, but he was playing at Boston College and was catching passes from Phil Dracovic. Phil Dracovic, I don't think, could hit water if he fell out of a boat. And I think Zay Flowers is somebody that I think he screams of a late-season breakout. So if you draft Zay Flowers at the beginning of the year, he might have these games where he sees like a 50 to 60% snap share. He's kind of not on the field a ton. He might catch a long, deep touchdown, kind of similar to like Marquise Brown when he was a rookie. And then all of a sudden at the end of the year, he's on the field 80% of the snaps. He's an integral part of this offense, and he's getting targeted heavily. And I think he could win you leagues at the end of the season. So if I had to pick out of those 3 guys, someone that I think is going to break out at their ADP, I think it's Zay Flowers. What do you guys think?
You're speaking my language. You're speaking my language. I pretty much would have dissected it the same way. The Liz Frank is an issue with Bateman. I got burned last year with him. Like, he was so good early. He had that game against Miami. Special.
Insane.
Elite. OBJ hasn't been fantasy. Special. He was special. Yeah. OBJ hasn't been fantasy relevant in like damn near half a decade at this point. Like, I'm just not doing it. It's like you said, like, I love rooting for OBJ. Like, I'm an OBJ fan, but I won't be an OBJ owner this year. And I think I need to keep those things separate for the sake of being a fan. Zay Flowers has got the juice, dude. His yard after catch ability is awesome. Watching him, like, he's just such a natural runner with the football in his hands, and I would definitely be picking him out of the 3. But how much of that does he get versus Mark Andrews will be kind of the big thing, and against the other wide receivers.
It's Mark Andrews, and then it's Rashad Bateman for me.
I'm not shocked. You just told all of our listeners to draft Breece Hall after an ACL, so I appreciate you going all in on upside.
Dude, just scared money don't make money in fantasy. Like,
take
you know
Javonte
what?
too. Like, go Javonte, Breece backfield with Bateman as your wide receiver too.
Just so I'm ready to get hurt.
To be honest, Shaun, I actually don't know if there is a path for the wide receivers to break into top 24 like wide receiver territory, like maybe fringe outside of it, because it is Mark Andrews, and I think Lamar will still do a significant amount of damage on the ground this year. So, like, kind of how we were saying about getting exposure to the offenses, like, just do it through the quarterback. Like, I've drafted Lamar a lot in best ball this year. Like, I want him on redraft teams this year. I'm excited to have him again in Dynasty. Like, I think we were talking about Josh Allen in our preview earlier, and it's like we're talking about him missing out on a top 3 spot maybe because of less rushing. Well, I think Lamar has a path to QB1 this year. I'm like planting a flag in Lamar this year. I'm super.
He's QB1. He will have a top 24 wide receiver. Is my point.
Without a doubt, because that means the passing numbers took a pretty significant spike.
Yeah.
Also, the only thing I'm worried about with Bateman and Zay Flowers is like they are paying Odell so much money.
Odell's going to be on the field. He's going to be running routes. Like he's going to be on the field 100%.
You're paying $15 million. He's definitely going to be on the field. That concerns me for Zay Flowers.
That's a good way to wrap this up, Keegan. I think we're all just really excited to watch the Ravens. It's like this is the best
my god,
team.
This is gonna be one of my favorite teams to watch this year.
And that'll be on my red zone.
And that will do it for part 3 of our team by team previews. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Before we jump, Keegan, anything for our listeners?
I love football.
You didn't say I love you. Wow, that kind of sent me.
I'm gonna start changing it. You know, I'm just gonna shout out things that I love at the end of the podcast.
Positivity.
You know?
I like that.
Spreading positivity today. I just love football.
I love Scott Hansen.
I love Lamp. I love football.
Scott Hansen.
Yeah, exactly.